Well, thank you all for being here. It's a great turnout for a Monday. I'm excited about this movie. I'm going to go through these slides kind of quickly. I was kind of unsure exactly what I wanted to put on these. I did, because this is kind of a larger audience, I wanted to kind of give you an idea of like what a roadmap in the sciences might look like. Because it doesn't always, it's not always a direct path. A lot of us in the sciences kind of have branched out quite a bit. So this is just a really, really quick background on me and my roadmap to get to the current job that I have, which is, of course, as was introduced there, the Taos County Ag Agent. So I was born in this place. Boo! This is Dallas, Texas. I grew up here. I went to high school here. I will say for Dallas, there's 6.5 million people. It does flood a lot, though. And because it floods a lot, there's actually a remarkable amount of wildlife for an urban area. It really sparked my interest in the natural world. My parents, there they are, bought a tree farm in East Texas in 2004, which we've been working on for quite a while. There they are with the nice dogwood in fall. Like many people from Dallas, I spent a lot of time up here in northern New Mexico as a kid growing up, backpacking as a young kid, skinning rattlesnakes. We had a place over there near Las Vegas. And when I was 16 years old, there's on the way to Wheeler Peak, I met a wildlife biologist up on the slopes of Wheeler Peak, and they had a butterfly net and a clipboard above the timberline, and the guy was like at work. And I said, that must be the coolest job ever. I want to do what that guy does. So in 2007, when I was 18, I moved from Dallas to Las Vegas, New Mexico. A little bit of a culture shock, just a little bit. I studied forestry, as was mentioned, and I got a master's in natural resource management. And so starting at Highlands, what a great place to engage with the sciences in a very real way. My first job, my first year in Las Vegas was working for the State Office of the Engineer doing discharge calculations on acequias. So I got to learn about the acequia system very early on. I also worked for Tierra Montes Soil and Water Conservation District very early on doing erosion control structures. Then, like many of my classmates in forestry, we did seasonal work for a long time. I worked in Coconino National Forest and Flagstaff. Worked for the New Mexico Forest and Watershed Restoration Institute, which is a terrible name. NMFRWRI is the acronym. It's great. Doing field work. We worked in 26 of New Mexico's 33 counties in the course of that job. Pretty great way to see the state. Worked for the research branch of the Forest Service, research branch of the Park Service, doing mostly birds, fire, and climate work. And then in 2015, I got to come home. And I got to come home to Las Vegas and start teaching at Luna Community College and Highlands. I taught at Highlands University for 8 years. Any Highlands alums in here or family with Highlands alums? Yeah, there we go. Good. Very cool. During that time, I also worked for USGS. I still do bird survey work for them. I also did some bird survey work at Rio Mora National Wildlife Refuge. You can't live in Las Vegas very long without doing some cattle work, so over the years I picked up quite a bit of ranching background and animal experience. Don't look too closely at that, but that's a calf getting brand. It's an important part of the process. And of course, moved here to Taos 2 years ago, and I get to farm in one of the most beautiful places in the world with my lovely, lovely wife. There we are. So that's how I got to this role. So I'm the county ag agent. I work for the Cooperative Extension Service with New Mexico State University. I'm going to do a real brief, quick history lesson here on what that is. In 1862, the Morrill Act helped establish the land-grant university system. The Hatch Act in 1887 established experimental stations to go with those land-grant universities. So NMSU is the Ag and Engineering College. UNM is the Liberal Arts College, and of course Highlands was the Teachers College, New Mexico Normal College, right? So I've been fortunate enough to work with two of these institutions. The Smith-Lever Act of 1914 established what's called a Cooperative Extension Service. This is a service that helps to inform citizens about agriculture, home economics, public policy, leadership, 4-H economics, things like that. The act helped farmers learn new agricultural techniques. It was really an outreach program from the beginning. So we seek to deliver practical, research-based knowledge and programs that improve New Mexicans' way of life, quality of life. Okay? What this really did was bring the university to the people. Okay? I was fortunate enough to teach at Highlands University for 8 years, but now every day I get to teach whoever I'm talking to, if they want to hear it. Okay? So really, it made it possible for everyone to have access to the information. And this was an era before the internet, before a lot of widespread publications, before a lot of widespread literacy. Okay, so the agent really was the person that had gone through the university classes and is there to answer questions and try to be helpful, okay? We try to address what are the needs of the local community whenever possible. There is, in fact, an office in every single county in New Mexico, all 33 counties, which is pretty cool. So the Smith-Lever Act and this time period when extension got its start was really in this time period when farms in the U.S. were really at their peak in terms of the number of farms. Notice here, this is the number of farms. This is the average farm size. So we're talking about an era when lots of people were farming on, pretty small acreage in that post-Homestead Act era, before the big monopolization of agriculture and industrialization of agriculture, where lots of people were doing lots of different things in their backyards, which, let me tell you, in Taos, people do all kinds of crazy stuff in their backyards, right? This is what my job looks like to Norman Rockwell in 1948. There is a Rockwell painting called The County Agent, which is kind of neat. He's there working on some 4-H dairy breed here, and there's chickens running around. So this is what my job looks like on the best days of my job, okay? The county agent. All right, so that's my role. I'm not going to read anything of what this is on here, but we do a lot of different things. Basically, we're there to help. We work with local agricultural producers. We collaborate with community partners, and Alianza Agricultura is in the house, so woo, okay? We support our annual county fair efforts. We team with other extension agents. We do a bunch of stuff. And we're expected to know a fairly large amount of different kinds of information. One piece of sage advice, though, that I got in my job is that people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care, okay? And that's really when we're talking to people who have their own chicken flock, who have their own backyard sheep flock, who are working on their family's acequia that they've been on for 150 years, really want to show that we care, right? You can go online and find out a lot of information. There's textbooks about a lot of this stuff, but really people want a personal human to walk through, listen to what kind of problems people are dealing with. So we listen to folks' problems, whatever's going on in their operation. We empathize with it. I have a terrible goat that gets out all the time, so I can empathize with anybody with goat problems. And then we start to formulate a plan of action, okay? So our job is really to kind of connect producers and resources. We're kind of like a cog in a wheel, okay? So on to tonight's movie. This is Sheep in a Meadow by August Frederick Schenck. And anybody who's ever had sheep, how many people in the room have sheep? Hey, all right, we got some sheep people in the house. Very good. Or grew up with sheep. Know that when you're watching your flock in a pasture or up in the mountains, it can be one of the most serene, most beautiful things. August Schenck, he was a German painter. He painted a lot of sheep. If you like sheep, look into his work. So it's one of the most beautiful things you can take part in, and this painting is called Anguish. It's also something that can cause a lot of anguish. When you're in charge of the husbandry of these animals that, for many intents and purposes, are kind of defenseless and need your husbandry to be around, things can go wrong, and it can be pretty devastating when it does. And that's part of what today's film explores. So the movie is about sheep producing. I'm not going to give any major spoilers here. Sheep producing area in Western Australia. They have an infectious zoonotic disease, so an animal transmitted via animals disease, and it's in a rural agricultural community. I do apologize. This is a foreign language film. They're going to be speaking Australian the whole time, so good luck understanding what they say. If you like this movie, do check out, just a few years previously, they made, this is a remake actually, they made this movie in Iceland, in Icelandic, with Icelandic sheep, which I actually have an Icelandic sheep, 2 of them. So if you like this movie, you can see more. So, some themes from the film. Australia has a lot of sheep. Australia has about 70 million sheep across the country. New Zealand has about 25 million sheep across the country. The United States only has about 5 million sheep left in our country. That's not a lot, okay? We obviously used to have a lot of sheep. Who can say where this is? Trampas, right? Yeah, Trampas, Truchas area, right? So there's the church. Somebody's just casually, moving the sheep from pasture to pasture right there in the middle of the town. You can still see this kind of thing in Taos. There's posts all the time about sheep running loose on the highway. But, certainly we've diminished our flocks over the years, right? And there's a lot of different reasons for that. This is a graph showing the number of people in New Mexico over time in orange. There we are, a little over 2 million. This is cattle over time, right around 1.4 million. And this is the sheep population within New Mexico over time. So when we talk about historic sheep populations, when we talk about the connections that people have to sheep in our communities, this was a big deal not that long ago, 70, 80 years ago. Okay, huge numbers not that long ago in the not too distant past. Fun fact, humans started to outnumber cattle and sheep in New Mexico in the early 2000s, and we've been getting it wrong ever since. Okay, so there's also a theme of animal health and well-being being tied to the agricultural community. You'll see in the movie when the flocks have problems, the people begin to have problems. And these kind of rural communities where the basis of the economy is coming from the ground. We're growing grass, we're converting that into food, we're selling that product off. The economy is based on photosynthesis, based on farming. And we see that when that gets out of line, economics and other things start to go out of line. Agricultural communities also can face multiple threats. We're going to see natural threats in the film. We're going to see a little bit about wildfires in the film. We're going to see a little bit about human-caused problems in the film. And this is something that agricultural communities face. It's the natural disasters. Our vecinos over in Las Vegas dealing with massive flooding again, dealing with that, right? So the natural disasters are just around the corner always in these kind of communities. And then in the film, they take a very heavy-handed approach to say the government response is pretty bad, and it is in the film. And I'll talk a little bit about how that's different in New Mexico for this kind of topic. But it is certainly something we've seen, again, with Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon Fire and things like that. You know, big federal agencies are sometimes pretty clunky, and when we're dealing about millions of dollars and recovering people's lives, it can be hard to give that soft touch. Obviously, there's exceptions to that kind of rule. There's people that work in these communities with agencies. They're an integral part of that. But certainly the film will touch on that topic. There's also some sociological themes from the film. The pride of profession. You know, the people in the film are sheep farmers. They farm sheep. They don't farm alpacas or anything else. They farm sheep. It's a big part of their pride and their makeup. And they're stewards of the land, and in doing so, they wear a lot of hats. A lot of members of our acequia communities also sit on a bunch of boards, and they're volunteer firefighters, and they work for a living, and they farm for a living, right? They're doing multiple kinds of things. There's also quite a bit in this film of things that plague agricultural communities. The solitude, the substance abuse, suicide. There's no suicide in this film. I'd give you a warning about that. There's none in this film, but certainly solitude and substance abuse are touched on, and these are things that really do plague agricultural communities across our country. And then farm succession. There's going to be a bunch of old guys working sheep in this film, not a whole lot of young people. So where are the young people at, right? There's a few scenes of kind of younger people coming back onto the farm, but we're looking at some guys in their 70s doing some hard work. And then my last kind of theme here is that farmers and ranchers are really clever. They're really good at fixing things and dealing with problems and putting things together with some baling twine, right? So those could be solutions to on-farm problems, like we'll see in the film. And when we as a community, and I think Taos does this really well, when our communities really get behind our agricultural, our agrarian population, and get behind what they're doing, we can start to solve off-farm problems. Things like climate change, things like trying to sequester carbon, things like creating a more secure and safe and healthy food system. Right? And we, of course, have a lot of that energy going on in Taos. So what else is going on in Taos? This is a photograph from a satellite image, 1991. We're looking at Ranchitos, or 240 here. Here's Camino Medio right here. And this is 1991. Pick a spot in the image. It's going to flash forward here. There's a few more houses in there. Let me go back there. Yeah, just a few, right? So we've got a lot of different pressures in Taos County facing agricultural communities. The connections to agriculture in this community are deep, right? The indigenous Pueblos, Taos Pueblo has been farming this soil for a long time. The Spaniards been farming it a long time. Newcomers been farming it not as long, but still a long time too, right? So really the agricultural soils, the acequias, the rivers that flow into Taos helped create the Taos that we see today. The risk to these kind of connections between the people that live here and the land include land access. If y'all didn't know, land's expensive here. Climate variability, right? This has been not as hot as last summer so far, but historically, compared to that 1991 picture, we're looking at a very different Taos climate. Lost connections to agriculture, right? You got to go find work somewhere else. You have to move away. That's the story that's old as time in northern New Mexico. And lost access to markets. We're competing with, apples from Washington State and beef from Brazil and all kinds of stuff from somewhere else, right? It's difficult. And of course, development pressure. So, this movie is about diseases. The main disease in the film is called ovine Jonas disease. That's how you pronounce that. It's a gastrointestinal microbial type of disease. It's the same family of germs that cause leprosy and tuberculosis. It's basically lesions in the lower intestine that basically keep the animal from taking in nutrients. So we say that it's wasting. They waste away. They kind of just get skinny over time. The microbes are shed via feces and so it is an infectious disease. There's no cure for the disease that's shown in the film, but vaccines do exist in Australia. This isn't really a concern in the U.S., this disease. It's estimated that about 70% of dairy herds actually have this particular disease, or the bovine version, and it's not really a big concern. Pasteurization kills off the microbes. Really, it's other things that we worry about in New Mexico, some of which are contagious, some of which are just sort of endemic and always around, things like coccidiosis, clostridiums, pneumonia. Respiratory and digestive diseases are most of the problems we see with livestock. So what happens when the county agent gets a call about a sick animal? Well, first off, call your veterinarian, not me. I am not a veterinarian. I can help with things, but you should be calling your vet. You need to have established a VCPR, a veterinarian client-patient relationship. Our large livestock veterinarian in the area is Dr. Gavin Kuykendall with Three Rocks Veterinary Service. He's a great guy. I bet there's people in this room who Gavin has showed up at 3 in the morning and helped you sort out what's wrong. He's a fantastic human being. So we have excellent veterinarians. But then we want to start asking, is there a known cause of death? What caused this death? Does this require a necropsy, like an autopsy, but for an animal? Do we need the state veterinarian diagnostics lab? And should we inspect the farm? Should we see if there's poisonous plants around? Should we see if there's something going on with the water? Okay, this is kind of where I come in my role. When they approached me about this movie night, I was actually in Wagamama, New Mexico, looking at a ranch that had lost 17 yearlings in a week period. 17 of them out of 300, and they all came from one pasture. So I got called out to come look and do a survey of poisonous plants. We're still actually working on that case. We're not sure what's going on, but it's pretty cool to see how this process goes when we have something that can be pretty devastating for somebody. What we do is we have something called ALERT. This is the Agriculture Livestock Incident Response Teams. This is a group of veterinarians, county agents like myself, specialists, the state veterinarian in charge, and state wildlife veterinarian. And we basically start helping figure out, is this a contagious disease? Do we need to be worried about this? We do an annual biosecurity training. We go through logistics of incident command and let's say an 18-wheeler drops on the highway, cattle are stuck in it, what do you do? Okay, so we go through those kind of trainings. A lot of continuing education, briefings on ongoing cases, and we do very, very real live training simulations. We also have reportable diseases. I'm not going to go over what's in that. So again, we try to keep the public safe by having these alert trainings, open communication between our veterinarians and our people that work in extension and things like that. We also have a lot of continuing education. Beef quality assurance is something that we have a lot of producers in our county that have gone through this training. It's everything on vaccine safety, where to put the needle, what to do if a needle breaks off in an animal, humane handling, low stress handling, all that kind of stuff. People take lots of hours of continuing education to make sure these animals are raised safely. And then we have producer education programs. This was a sheep health talk we did back in April. It feels like a long time ago. And then, of course, farm visits. When I see something on someone's place, I respectfully will mention it, hey, have you thought about this? Hey, have you thought about this? Hey, could use some sanitation there, right? So again, it's kind of a community type of thing. That was a lot. I tried to fit in, I'm used to 45 minutes to lecture, so I apologize. I tried to squeeze that in there. Okay, I don't know if I have time for questions, but I'll be around after the movie. This is my email. at NMSU, and that's our office phone if anybody has any questions. Thank you.